We don't have to do anything as physios. We can just be like, refer to video number 14. Or today will be 16 for running injuries and shin splints and
Is
stuff.
it 16 today?
Today is 16, yeah.
Wow.
Today is the 16th one.
It's our sweet 16.
It is our sweet 16.
What do people do for that?
I don't know. I've seen the like My Super Sweet 16 show on MTV. All I knew was like they spent $100,000+ on like useless stuff.
Wow.
Not useless. I mean, to show a child love is important, but a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, I don't think is needed. I don't know. What would you do?
So you're saying we're not getting Bentleys?
I don't think so. Let me ask the accountant.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Hey, accountant. What do we get? Oh, nothing. Okay.
Can you crunch the numbers again?
You get served.
Crunch them again.
Close this up here. Let me close this one. Weird, never close those curtains other than like nowadays. What?
These days.
What's going on with Zoom? Well, it's recording. That's the big part. So, yeah, we always go through these conversations of should we start cutting our own hair and stuff. So maybe we'll do a post on Rob cutting my hair one day. I trust Rob.
About clippers.
I trust Rob.
You pick your length. I can do 3/8, 4/8,
3/4,
2/8.
Yeah, we can. We can cut some hair. I'm okay with that. Dad jokes? Anybody want dad jokes? My uncle named his dogs Rolex and Timex. They're his watchdogs. Was that good?
That was good, yeah.
Unless you have any off your. You got good jokes. I don't really have.
I don't have any.
I have to Google them all. So today we got running. Something I'm not very good at. So
5 out of 4 people admit they're bad with fractions. I like that. That's like a good like researchy kind of thing too. Like
that's pretty good.
60% of the time, it works every time.
I should have got some running ones.
I should have got some running.
Because the other day I had the TMJ jokes, but most of it was with Jaws, like the shark. So it was pretty funny. Some of them were actually pretty good, pretty morbid. I kind of stay away from the morbid ones.
Yeah, there's a graveyard one here that I'm gonna.
Gonna
maybe exclude today.
That's exactly what I said yesterday. I was like, oh, this is funny, but not right now.
Spring is here. I got so excited, I wet my plants. I biked here today, and it's quite wet outside, and my bike doesn't have good so it felt like a spray protection. So yeah, we'll keep the camera above the waist today.
Yeah, that's true.
It looks not good.
Running interesting because I often what is it called? Eat my own words. So back in the day, I was like, oh, running, whatever. It's not like there's no such thing as a running high. And you can experience that high in different sports and activities. And then one summer I started running a bit. And I experienced it one day and it was amazing. It was unreal. I ran 7K and then maybe less, maybe 5K. And then I just could run the last, I added 2 more kilometers to it. And then it was a euphoric feeling. The last 2K was it just felt good. I wasn't in excruciating pain.
That's important.
Which I normally am in other sports. My knee today, holy jeez.
Yeah, brain chemicals are a funny thing, I think, with running, right?
Yeah, the opioid. No, is it opioids? No.
I think you get probably some opioids, maybe some endorphins.
That's the one, endorphins, yeah.
Endorphins.
We need Brandon here. He knows more about that.
You can also use opioids when you run.
You could use opioids. I'd run a lot better if pain-free. Runner's knee? No, not here. IT band syndrome? Not a problem here.
I had I did a half marathon a few weeks ago. I think Sunny's heard this story.
Yeah.
But any longer run, you get the odd pains as you go. I have a bit of a right Achilles thing. I felt it the first 5 minutes, then it went away. Yeah. Then a bit of knee pain here and there kind of came on. And the whole time I was thinking I wonder what my brain's doing, right? Where are these pains coming from? I don't have injuries. It's it just makes you think. And then I get back to the hotel room and take my shoe off, and my sock is soaked in blood. And I would have had no clue. I didn't feel a thing. Exactly. My toe was half chewed off.
It's like pain. It's an interesting topic because like well, I can't say I enjoy pain, but it makes me know I'm alive. Like when I think about it, if I actually sit here and think about all my joints and issues and stuff, I'm like, well, I'm like a constant 2 out of 10 pain. But to me, that's good because I can I can be like, okay, this hurts. Okay, that means it's too tight. I need to do some rehab for that area, or like it keeps me fresh. So if my knee hurts, I know, okay, I haven't iced it yet today, and I haven't. So I need to do that a couple times today before doing my evening workout. And then like hip flexor, that's an issue. And yeah, Rob's got bloody feet.
Not right now. Oh, I should check
when
before I say
he runs. It's funny when you talk about issues.
Maybe like some peripheral neuropathy. It was also -15, so it could have just been frozen.
Rob's gonna walk in next week with a prosthetic limb. No, that's bad. I shouldn't wish that upon anybody. That's that got dark. It gets dark all the time.
Talk about Oscar Pistorius.
Oh God,
he's like the Blade Runner, right? He's got the prosthetics.
I supported him. So okay, this is one story. So hopefully I don't like lose numbers, but this is kind of funny. So we were all doing the MMI, so like the multiple mini interviews to get into physio school, which some of you are aware of. Great process, by the way, so much fun. I was at McMaster, the university who created the MMI, and one of the questions was, what do you think about, and they use the word able-bodied athletes and like the Paralympics, like, do you think we should combine them together? And I used him as an example, the Blade Runner, and be like, you know what, somebody like him, his limbs have been amputated, so a lot of his muscles don't insert onto anything. So you need an advantage mechanically to be at the same kind of level as an able-bodied person. So I was like, well, he needs the blades to like get momentum and things like that. And then they looked at his times and they were similar to able-bodied people. And I was like, yeah, well, I think he should be allowed to compete in the Olympics, not the Paralympics, wherever he wants. And I think a year after that or 2 years after that, whatever he did,
It happened, yeah.
And I was like, son of a gun, I supported him. I mean, like it wasn't wrong of doing that at that time, but I felt pretty bad after. I'm like, man,
it's funny. Hey,
he did some damage.
The things that come up.
Yeah, the things that come up is just, with time, I'm just like, man.
Yeah. Are we screen sharing right now?
We are screen sharing, yeah. So I just thought I'd open it up. Running pain-free featuring shin splints.
Yeah.
I make these presentations and like grammar, might be sometimes not the main concern. I'm just like, I need the information up there and the images, and it looks kind of professional. I like to thank Chelsea Connell, a great member of the team, whom I miss dearly. She makes like the backgrounds and like makes everything look so good, and I appreciate her talent. I always have. Nowadays, probably more so because I'm not very good at PowerPoint. And
just to be clear, she's still alive.
She's still alive and well.
She's not at the clinic right now.
We miss her quite a bit.
In case anyone took that the wrong way.
If she's listening, I'm sorry I didn't make it. Oh man, I thought this wouldn't get as dark as yesterday, but it's definitely more dark today. So, okay, running. If you have any questions throughout this, just pop them up and we'll answer them as we go. So we're doing running pain-free featuring shin splints, and let's also make a guest experience of IT band syndrome. And the thing is, like, we want to cover injuries every day, but we don't want to cover them all because this could go on for like 3 hours and we'll have the 1 hour time limit on Instagram. So the idea is to go through, maybe every Friday we could do like running injuries or something like that, and get like a theme like that. And then maybe even, I was thinking of messaging running room, be like, hey guys, you want to like have one of your trainers there and like we can bounce things back and forth. So if you have any suggestions of who we should combine with, like companies, organizations, let us know, because then we can reach out to those individuals. Lots of people got nothing to do right now, so it would be good to connect with those individuals in the community. So before I blabber on too much, we should get started.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Rob's got some shoes, extra shoes, so I
got
can't
some
wait.
shoes, yeah.
Can't wait to see what's gonna happen with extra shoes. Maybe he's gonna throw them at me.
Luckily, you can't smell these through Instagram. Is that correct?
Yeah. It can,
Let me know.
In all honesty, they don't smell like anything.
It's not like 4D or something with smell-o-vision.
The 4D just sprays water in your face.
You
Here's
imagine?
Rob's bloody socks.
Oh no.
Oh gosh. I'm
Oh.
sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm going crazy every day. So here we go. Hello, Hawkstone. Very good to have you here. So, running pain-free featuring shin splints. And Rob, we can throw whatever you want to throw in whenever you like.
Yeah, sounds good.
Shin splints. So medial tibial stress syndrome, in brackets MTSS, is one of the most common causes of exercise-induced lower leg pain, localized pain along the distal 2/3 of the posterior medial tibia. I can get Rob to show you where that is on his tibiae, nice socks. Yeah. So that's kind of the region of where shin splints happen. I'm sure many of you have experienced it. I've experienced it. What about you, Rob? Have you had it?
No, I don't think I have
What?
Actually. I know, I'm sorry.
I was expecting that. Jeez, just make it up.
Okay, yes.
Okay, he's that, but he knows exactly where the pain is.
But so. Yeah, you can have like your anterior or your posterior shin splint.
And like it's common in a lot of sports and activities. So running or impact loading in the lower limb creates stress within the tibia, so producing pain in that area, and it often limits activity. Quite painful, very uncomfortable. I've had it before, and it's just like a toothache. Like it's so annoying. Incident rate ranging from 13.6 to 20% of runners, so that's quite high for rates, and up to 35% for the military. That's an interesting fact. It's a little bit higher. The assumption is like they do a lot of rucksack marches and things like that, so they're like carrying 80 to 100 pounds and marching 12, 13, 14, 15K. So they do a lot of activity. So that's one thought. So the dysfunction of the tibialis anterior and posterior, they're commonly implicated in these injuries. Can also be tightness of the gastroc, soleus, and plantaris muscles, so all the muscles on the back of the leg. So tibialis anterior, posterior. Rob's going to show. They're going to be a bit too deep. We'll have to cut off some.
Tib ant.
Yep.
And then tibia.
There you go.
And then tib post.
There you go. And then the posterior components, the gastroc. We talked about that last week quite a bit, and the soleus. So that big media area of Rob's. Very nice calves he has. Very nice calf.
Calves or calves?
Calves or calves. We covered that last week. So, so yeah, like you have these issues can alter your running mechanics and can occur from improper training. So I find a lot of the times individuals come in and say, hey, I have shin splints. And you talk to them about their running volume, and it's just like, okay, you went from 5K to 15K in a week, or you changed the surfaces you're running on, or like something has changed. There's a big change in their training, and I find that's like a lot of overuse. Uneven surfaces, bad shoes like bad insoles, insoles that don't absorb a lot of shock actually have a lot of implications in these injuries. So I find through research that you get something with a bit more padding, it helps quite a bit. And Rob's going to talk about that, I believe, with the extra shoes he brought.
Yeah.
Anything to add about that, Rob?
Nope, sounds good.
So shin splints, you have the tib post right there, tib ant, kind of where Rob showed, and then the pain. So the red is where people normally find the pain, and to the right you have the shin splint pain. So same thing, that middle part of the tibia. That's typically where the pain is. So quite a large area. It doesn't mean it's going to be in the whole area, but typically that's where the pain occurs. You also have IT band syndrome. So same thing, non-traumatic overuse injury, meaning same kind of thing. Volume could be an issue, and it's just a repetitive type of injury. Underlying weakness of hip abductors, research has shown a little bit about that, and we'll talk about that too. Repetitive knee flexion extension movements, so running and cycling, and it's friction between the lateral femoral epicondyle and the iliotibial tract. So the lateral epicondyle is over here in the tibia. So when you flex your knee, that IT band is posterior to that area, so behind that area. And when you extend your knee, it moves anterior, so in front of that bone there. So for people on Zoom, posterior is here, anterior is here. So if we extended this leg, straightened it out, that band would be relatively anterior. So that rapid motion anterior to posterior would just create more friction, and that typically causes this issue. So more friction, meaning more rubbing, meaning inflammation. And then if you keep aggravating it, it doesn't get better over time, and it can get worse. So anything to add about that, Rob?
No, I think that's good. Yes. I think that, I think that's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And then if you wanted to show
the
femur, the lateral epicondyle.
Femur. Yeah.
So right
again,
there.
Like the IT band kind of moving in here.
Yeah.
So I think the pain a lot of the time comes from like compression of the adipose tissue underneath the IT band up there at the lateral knee.
Yeah. I agree, because Rob is correct, as always. So maybe we can hold on the research time.
Sure, yeah.
And Rob can talk about a few more things.
Sounds good.
I'm just so excited about the research. I can hardly contain myself. So it's going to be hard for me to wait. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Throw a bad joke in there.
Since you were talking about like kind of overuse injuries versus like more like acute injuries, like we talk about anywhere in the body, that's kind of a good area to start with. I think a lot of researchers have had a hard time like nailing down a definition of a running injury, which from what I understand has made it hard to kind of track running injuries over time too. For example, like footwear has changed a ton since like the 40s.
Oh gosh,
people were basically running in like what we would call like dress shoes nowadays, right? And then we had like kind of the tiger shoes, like the kind of the minimalist, and then more towards like the Nike shoes in the 70s that were a bit more supportive. Yeah. And then like minimalist trends lately and like barefoot running trends. Oh gosh, but if you look at like injury incidents over time, it's hard to see trends. And I think one reason for that is different definitions of running injuries. Yeah. So like, for example, if you like sprain your ankle while you're running, is that a running injury? It's not like overuse or kind of like running pattern dependent. Or if you fall and sprain your wrist while running, like, would that be classified as a running injury? It's kind of a gray area, true, right? Yeah. Versus like the true, like you run, you get that lateral knee pain, kind of that like consistent overuse type. So,
it'd be hard to like define it, and then the training volume. So a lot of research are like, well, what do you classify as running? Is it going to be like 1K, 2K, 5, 10, whatever it is? So,
totally, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Looking at different populations too, like elite runners are going to be doing over 100 kilometers a week. Yeah. Whereas like a beginner runner will get an overuse injury if they go beyond like 3 kilometers a week. Exactly. Which is like nothing, right? So you're going to see like different like injury trends in those groups too, right?
Yeah, so, quite interesting.
Yeah. Can you guys see this this pretty little chart that I made here? Try to get it on both screens at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's on both. I'll get out of screen. I'm still here.
So basically this is like illustrating what Sunny was talking about, how like overuse injuries are gonna happen basically. So our vertical axis here is going to be our chance of developing an injury. So you can see that, and then our bottom one is going to be training volume. So I tried to keep it pretty clean. So basically, as we move towards my right-hand side here, we're in very low training volumes, and we're going to get an increased risk of injury because we're stress shielding tissue a lot, and it's going to become very weak from disuse. And then over towards like my left hand here, which would be the kind of the more high volume end of the graph, we're going to get into injuries related to overworking the tissues. So depending on how well those are coming through the video, I have those ones kind of dotted around with little red marks. That's going to be injuries either from stress shielding or from overuse. In the middle section there, the blue section, which is basically kind of like the horizontal portion of my line here at the bottom, that's going to be like your tissue like homeostasis basically. So that's kind of the amount of activity you're used to, where your tissue turnover is basically like evening itself out. So kind of benefits you're getting from training are kind of like, you basically have like homeostasis where things aren't changing. Like your body's tolerating the load, but it's not adapting either to become stronger or weaker. And then our little green area here, and this is kind of, so this green area here is going to be kind of pushing it so much that we're getting some adaptive homeostasis where things are getting stronger, but where we're not pushing it so much as to be in the red zone here where we're going to get an overuse injury.
Yeah.
So like in physiotherapy, I think, well, this is good for running injuries, but I think you can apply this like more broadly too to lots of different like overuse injuries like tendinopathies. So yeah, so basically a problem people get into sometimes is they push it a bit too hard, or they develop like a training injury, and then they rest too much. So they get too much stress shielding. So that's going to move them down towards this end of the graph. So now they're doing much less activity and they feel fine because they're not loading their tissues, but their tissues are becoming weaker because they're not being loaded. Mm-hmm. And now you have kind of less capacity. And then when you try to exercise again, you're going to get back into that kind of painful overuse area more quickly.
Yeah.
And people can kind of get stuck in a cycle where they're trying to get back to activity, re-injure, rest again, get weaker, try to get back. And every time they try to get back, their capacity is going to be less and less.
Yeah.
Until eventually stuff like, I don't know, going down the stairs or like getting out of bed in the morning is painful because they've kind of like deconditioned all the way to that end of the graph.
Yeah, so I find that's where like the education and self-management comes in handy with like a physio. So you look at the tele-rehab, huge buzz about that, right? A lot of clinics are offering it. We're offering it as well. And a lot of people are like, well, I need to see a physio to get manual therapy. And yes, that's a big part of what we do, but it's not necessary all the time. So something like this, like a shin splint issue, we can provide just education, self-management, exercise, and that's going to be enough. Usually with this injury, I don't typically do too much hands-on, maybe some like needling, which is an adjunctive treatment. And it's not needed. You can still treat through, like, this is where education helps. Like, okay, don't go full rest. Here's what you should do and how you should do it. And here's, more importantly, how you adjust that program. Like, this is too much, this is too little. We need to get a good balance. So yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And that just, again, like speaks to the importance of education, which I think we probably do a ton on here.
Oh, Chelsea just signed. We just said we missed you, Chelsea. So we missed like all these good things I said about you. Truthfully, there's evidence. I can send you the video that's being recorded. Appreciate you and all your hard work. So
yeah,
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Back to the injury.
So yeah, basically like the running injuries that we're talking about are going to be those like injuries resulting from training errors. So like too much training, rather than like our ankle sprains, or if you're crossing the street with your headphones in and like a car runs into you. Because I don't know, those are also like injuries running, but like
the management. I get those quite a bit. The whole like getting ran down with your headphones in.
For sure, yeah. Or you fall and you land on your arm, break your collarbone. Like again, it could be a running injury, but the management's not going to be like running specific the same way as like a tibial stress fracture or
with the car might be like a halo around the head.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, depending where you get hit.
This is getting darker somehow.
Anyways, anything can happen to you while you're running, but the running injuries we're talking about are kind of those like load dependent ones where you push it too hard and then you end up with an injury of some type. So this is another, this one's a little bar graph that I made this morning too. I was loving the colored Sharpies this morning. So bar, oh yeah.
Oops, I was gonna post something. Oh, there we go, good. Sorry, oh no. Oh. I'm messing that up. Sorry, Rob.
Hey, that's okay.
Continue. The screen's good.
Yeah. So the bar on this side, I have labeled as load capacity. So like we were talking about, that's the amount of load that your tissue can tolerate. If you exceed that, you're going to get injured. And if you're not pushing that, it's going to slowly kind of decline over time. And the bar on my right-hand side here is your training volume. So generally, if you're kind of maintaining that steady homeostasis, your training volume is going to be very similar to your load capacity. So your load capacity is not going to be increasing. It's not going to be decreasing. It's going to kind of be at that happy medium. Like we saw with the other illustration of the same thing, if we decrease our volumes quite a bit, so let's say I come in and I have a little bit of IT band friction syndrome, and my therapist says, you have to like take 6 months off from running, which is, we'd probably call that like excessive rest.
Yes.
And that's just an example, but anyways. So if I'm resting too much, then my volume my volume is going to be very low for that 6 months. So resulting from that, I'm not going to have pain because I'm not loading anything, but my load capacity is going to come down a ton.
Yeah.
Then at the 6 month mark, if I try to go and maybe do my regular like 30K a week, I'm going to run into pain like almost immediately. Again, I'm probably going to rest. that cycle is going to make my load capacity get lower and lower each time. Yeah. So basically, like we had on the other graph, if you can kind of push your volume just beyond what your load capacity is going to be, that's where your load capacity is going to give you that, again, that kind of, we'll use like adaptive homeostasis, where tissue is getting a little bit stronger over time and it's going to allow you to do more. Yeah, like running specifically, the importance of strengthening for runners is that you can easily load your tissues heavier than you would with running. So I have that jotted in here as like our little green box on top. So like our load capacity and volume is going to be different for every tissue in the body. So it could be like our Achilles tendon if we're talking about that, or like our tib post tendon if we're talking about a posterior shin splint, or maybe even like kind of the bony integrity of the tibia if we're talking about like a tibial stress fracture.
Yeah.
And those are all going to like kind of behave the same way. And if we can like strengthen those tissues with strength exercises, so like with like heavy slow resistance or plyometrics or eccentrics, those kinds of things, we can actually have like load capacity that's kind of exceeding our desired training volume. And that's good because it's going to kind of stop us from running into those injuries. It gives us kind of like a safe buffer zone. So if I'm like routinely strengthening my, let's say like my glutes for that IT band, then even if I push my volume a little bit too high, I'm going to be protected from developing an overuse injury in that tissue.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are my graphs.
Those are great.
Thanks. Yeah.
I always like envy Rob and his art. No, that's not art. That's science. Science and art.
I think it can be both, right?
I think it can. It's beautiful. It's truly a beautiful thing. So I can't do those things. I can barely do like PowerPoints, but at least PowerPoints when you type, like it's always the same and like everything's lined up. And
it's true. Yeah. Computers are way more efficient for making graphs.
No, this is
anyone making serious graphs should use computers.
Like I like Rob's way of doing posts. Like he'll use our whiteboard in our offices and like zoom in on things and do it that way. And I like that so much better than I do it. I just not wing it, but I don't have a script. Initially when we made posts, I had a script and it just was off. I had to keep re-recording. Chelsea knows of this, a lot of good times and laughs and frustrations. Her probably frustrated at me for taking so long, but nowadays I'll just like, Kate, we're going to talk about this subject. I'm just going to just freestyle it. And it usually ends up fine.
And if I don't illustrate, I end up using my hands. Like these are my bar graphs and this kind of becomes like my little parabola.
We can
and
just
then
get
it's
like
impossible to know what I'm talking about.
Get a sparkler and just like
that's right. Yeah.
Use the line for a bit.
That'd be good. Yeah. That could be like,
I don't know if we have good
fire codes and stuff like that.
Codes, so we don't. I mean the blinds and stuff and the curtains are flame resistant. So
anyways, bottom line, like running injuries are training load errors. So if you load too much, you're going to get an injury. It can be like any of a variety of injuries, but that's what's going to cause injuries in runners. Unless you get hit by a car, but again, that's different.
It's different, yeah. So a lot of it's going to be, guys, whether you're a physio, a previous client, someone who's just watching that follows us, is a lot of it is knowing what to do, when to do it, right? If you're inflamed, active inflammation, it's acute, like the pain just started, then, take that rest being don't run as much, still means be active, like ride a bike or something like that, or do a bit of jogging, alter what you're doing, and then go from there. Like research is arguable, I guess, on what's a good running program. There's always like all these differences. The only thing I could ever find is interval training. That's the only thing that across the board is like, well, and we can talk about that a little bit later. So it's all about taking care of your body, right? So like Rob showed, it can be like a loop. It could be a cycle where you don't do anything for a week and then you go back to running and then boom, you're off again for a week, rather than making a program for yourself or getting one made, right? So
exactly. Yeah. And again, you can see the same patterns with, like say a worker comes in with tennis elbow.
Yeah.
If you just rest them for 8 weeks, then try sending them back to work, that tissue will have like degraded so much. Like sure, you will have like maybe settled the irritation there initially, but if you don't get them started with kind of some gradual loading, at some point, then so that's a good principle, I think, just for overuse injuries in general.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. That's it for graphs?
That's it for those graphs, yeah.
Should I show the research now?
Yeah, go for it.
And I like being like, I don't know if you want to say informal, but I like the way we do things because it's like a casual conversation. We do have a plan though. Like, it's not like we just have to just randomly draw this stuff right before. All right, I got a question. Do you guys find that there are any common weaknesses that you find in running population that typically tends to lead to? Yeah, we can comment on that as we go through, and some of the research will show this. A lot of the research shows, and like I find with runners, it's like hip abductors that are often weak, right? So if you're running long distance and doing endurance training, then you're not working on strength specifically. Like, your endurance is great, but all the other tissues are not. You need to do some sort of formal strengthening program. So find that could be at play. Some runners have more plantar flexion or excessive plantar flexion. That can change things. So when you think about tissue extensibility, like, what's loose is stretched and what's tight is strong. So then there's often imbalances, right? Even with internal, external rotators of the hip, which we'll be going through, show some issues. So it's looking at those imbalances and figuring out, okay, that's causing the issue or not. But I find there's a lot of imbalances with runners and jumpers. Like, you could apply this stuff to jumping athletes, so like volleyball, basketball, that kind of stuff, not just runners. But yeah, that's kind of how I would answer it. So yes, did I answer that? Yeah. Anything with shin splints that you find specifically, Rob, or like for weaknesses? Or
I think the glutes are an important one. Like, yeah, even if you kind of like think about like, I don't usually make a ton of like kind of gait changes with runners.
Yeah.
But like, one thing that you do see a lot is kind of the leg coming across midline too far. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of like, if you picture, like, if you've ever kind of been on a multi-use trail with a yellow line down the middle, and you kind of ran so your feet are on that line every single time. Yeah. So you're kind of always, so as far as the hips go, this is kind of my hips square or vertical. It just means that when I'm running, like, my legs are kind of coming in towards midline each time. So again, it's it's going to be kind of the glutes that are going to kind of abduct to counteract that. Yeah. And I forget what the question was. It was about that.
The weaknesses, weaknesses of shin splints and the IT band, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's good to be like specific to the area. If you're talking shin splints, do some ankle work. Yeah. I think it's also good to look like at different parts of the chain as well. Yeah. Because that hip pattern will kind of change the way the knee is loaded. It'll change the way like the tibia is loaded. Yeah. That's like a risk factor for stress fractures. Yeah. And then it'll also change the mechanics of the ankle. Exactly. The foot's going to be like a little bit more towards like an everted position if it's flat. So. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, even with the excessive plantar flexion being gastrocs tight or strong, then likely what's happening is the tib ant could be weak, mm-hmm. Right? So with the flexor, so plantar flexion, so pointing the toes down. For those who don't know what plantar flexion is, there's a little bit of jargon, but that means your gastrocs or calves or calves. Are tight, so there's too strong. So then you got the imbalance in the anterior, so the front of the leg. So you got to correct those things. So and then we'll go through some of the research quickly. I don't want to bore too many people with research, but I like research. Rob likes research. So research time. Risk factors for medial tibial stress syndrome in active individuals. So this is an evidence-based review, meaning there's a systematic review in which they took a number of studies and synthesized the data. So what they found, what increased these issues is BMI, so body mass index, which I say grain of salt, and they did as well. They're indicating that a higher BMI means someone's heavier, like in an unhealthy way. So you could have a high BMI, for instance, and be very muscular. So you're still healthy and have low body fat. So what they said is a better indicator to measure body fat. So if you're heavier, more impact in the joints and bone, more usage of the muscles, then a greater chance of getting something like this. Doesn't mean if you're heavy, you can't run. You just have to ease into it. Navicular drop, so that would give a decrease in tibial rotation and absorbing impact forces, so meaning more pronation, so more flat foot. So if we look at a navicular drop, if you wanted to show, just kind of general, we're not going to measure it, but there's, here. So flattening out. So drop meaning how much that navicular part or bone moves downwards, right? So flat feet, so pronated feet would be what they're getting at.
And if you're assessing this, like if there's physios or physio students watching, it's good to do it like in sitting like this, but you can also see what my arch does when I take load through it as well.
Yeah.
Mine aren't like flatter. It would be nicer to look at, but
yeah,
or more revealing to look at. But,
so they say to find neutral and then put weight through it and relax and then measure that difference. And if I believe it's 10 millimeters of a difference. Yeah, so you have greater hip external rotation that causes, or that they found is common in people that have medial tibial stress syndrome or shin splints, and greater ankle plantar flexion. So if you wanted to show plantar flexion, Rob, pointing the toes down, so individuals that had more plantar flexion showed to have some tibial stress issues, which the thought that the research article, and which makes sense, it alters the landing mechanics. So when you're running, those people are landing more forefoot, more on their toes, I guess you could say, or midfoot rather than their heel. So they showed that had a part to play. But then again, if you have more plantar flexion, it could mean that your tib anterior is stretched out, so to speak, and weak. So that's another thought. And we always say thought because it's speculation, right? You know the connections, but you don't always know why with research. So the idea is to try to fix those things, and then if it helps, then clinically you have some significance.
I think like another big thing, if we're talking like foot strike a little bit, is like that tibialis posterior. It's going to be kind of like part of that, like can you see it on both screens?
Now we can, yes.
Like this?
Yeah.
So it's going to be part of that group like behind the calf that's going to like plantar flex, right? Versus like tibialis anterior is going to be the group that's going to kind of pull the toes up a little bit. So the more common like landing patterns for runners are going to be like a heel strike, or kind of like Sunny said, like a forefoot strike. The heel strike is going to tend to kind of produce like more forces through the leg, and it's going to be associated with more injuries in the knee and the hip. Whereas like a forefoot strike, you can kind of imagine that if a runner is like running on their toes, like more or less, or the forefoot, this posterior group is always going to be active because you're basically holding that calf raise for the whole duration of your run, plus adding that like kind of that body weight load through it. So the tib post being one of the muscles that's going to kind of contribute to that. Again, like more plantar flexion, if we're talking kind of that forefoot strike, that muscle is going to be way more active. Whereas a heel striker who's pulling the toes up to kind of clear through before landing, that's an exaggeration, but the tib ant is going to be very active kind of for that pull up and then eccentrically on landing that you're not going to get with a forefoot strike. So again, like tib ant, you might get more with that heel strike pattern versus tib post more so with the forefoot pattern, if that makes sense.
For sure. That does make a lot of sense. That's a great explanation, Rob. Thank you. And Kirsten, did that answer your question? Thumbs up if it did, like earlier that you asked, or thumbs down if you want more clarification. Well, here's the hip abductor strength, one of the questions about the IT band syndrome. So looking at that relationship with the strength of the abductors and injuries in distance runners. This is a systematic review as well, and pretty recent, 2017. So I would say a pretty good article. And it shows 3 out of 5 IT band syndrome articles found weakness of hip abductors in runners with IT band syndrome. So that's some correlation there, right? So weakness of the hip abductors is found with people with IT band syndrome. Doesn't mean that it caused it, but that they show a relationship. So the best thing to do as a physio or a client or a patient is to try strengthening it and see if it makes a difference. If it does, then well, there's a relationship for your body. Like you just try it, works, continue. But you're gonna have to be patient and do it for a number of weeks. And then implications, so strengthen these muscles, we will cover some exercises. So we're gonna do some exercises for that. Anything to mention about that, Rob?
Nope, that sounds good. And yeah, I have seen, or I like heard that glute weakness may not like predict IT band syndrome. So it may be like that it happens as a result of that, like maybe a pain inhibition kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like you said, correlation, but like we don't know if it's causative.
Yeah, and that's the thing with research. Like you have in our world, you have like researchers and then clinicians. Clinicians being, let's say us, for example, at this clinic treating patients, researchers being in the lab and conducting these reviews. So you have the research side, which will just say, okay, these are linked, can't say why. And then you have clinicians now could just have their own theories and say, okay, this is what works. But the whole thing is blending the research and the clinical side together. So I think rather than not being at war with each other, but trying to take some of the research side and implementing it into practice, right? Just like this hip abductor strength, let's try to do it clinically and run like our own little studies. And that way, if we see more clients, we can be like, hey, this is what we do. This is why it works. Here it is supported by research, and here it is supported by the clinical side. And this excites us. Is like, for me as a physio, it's very exciting because I love having support from the research side and the clinical side. Mm-hmm. And that's why I still like doing a lot of research. Wish I could do more, but this whole pandemic thing gives me more time to look at research. So it's kind of cool now that, let's say when we reopen, we've covered so many different areas that we're learning newer things too, and like rationalizing why we do what we do. Yeah. So sorry, I always throw these tidbits in.
And that's good.
Knowledge translation. Maybe I missed you say that. Yes, knowledge translation would be the. Yeah.
I think generally speaking, as physios, we're not good at translating research into practice.
Yes, I think that's not like to bash everyone, but I think we could be better as physios to do that. And this experience has made me realize I need to do more research, which we do. Like every Friday we have posts about like rehab research Fridays and showing here's how to roll, for instance. Foam roll are a very common thing done, but this is the actual research explaining what's the best way to do it and what's the theory behind it. And it answered a lot of questions. A lot of athletes ask me, hey, should I roll before, after, during? Like if I roll during my activity, will it be a detriment to it? And that answer was found within one of the articles. And no, I think it doesn't matter. You just do it what feels right. So got off topic there. Well, not off topic, but, and that's the whole
knowledge
thing.
Translation.
Knowledge translation. And then patient response-based feedback, right? Like that's one thing that has stuck with me since I believe it was Jeff Bostick, Dr. G-Boz at the U of A that said that term, meaning constantly reassess patients and yourself. So do something, implement a treatment, and reassess while you do it. If there's improvement, okay, there's your rationale of why you're doing it, and then continue. If there's detriment, then you must change something. You're doing something wrong, right? So if you're strengthening hip adductors and you're making the shin splint or the IT band syndrome worse, then do the opposite, or try to change it up a bit. So so thank you, Alberta RMSA for that. Yes. Knowledge translation, that's the word. If Brandon was here, I think he'd be like just so excited and gung-ho. So it excites all of us as a team, and that's why I think we work together very well in the way we do. So yes, anything else you wanted to add about IT band syndrome or shin splints?
No. I think it's important. Good. Like when we talk about strengthening muscle, like we're strengthening the muscle, but we're also making the tendon stronger, making kind of like the tendon bone junction stronger. Mm-hmm. If we're talking like tibial stress syndrome or stress fractures, those kinds of things, we're making the bone stronger when we load it. When it's in the correct way. So I think strengthening you're making everything more resilient.
It's good. And then you're going to be able to run and do these activities for your lifespan, right? So running's not bad. Jumping's not bad. It just depends on how you're conducting it, right? So progress cautiously and gradually. Don't ramp things up too much. That's when we see, this is where it's like prevention, injury prevention is huge. You can prevent a lot of these things or limit how active the pain is, right? So if you're on it and notice something's wrong, and that day you're doing something about it, you're likely going to have less pain throughout that whole process and probably expedite that process. So exercise wise, Rob.
Yeah. Which one do you want to tackle?
There's so many. We can start with stretching. So let's say for shin splints, we can go through a few things. IT band, we'll do the hip abductor strengthening. With IT band, I'd say icing is a good idea. Taking Advil if you can, anti-inflammatories, that kind of stuff. We always get into that, but trying to use that RICE principle, rest, ice, compression, elevation. Well, elevation not so much because there's not much swelling with this, but rest and ice would be good for IT band syndrome, right? Like if you got pain on the side of that knee, above that knee, then get some ice on it, rest meaning just take it easy off the activity that you think caused the issue. So if a client come in with shin splints, say they were running 80 kilometers per week, what volume would you typically suggest to cut it back to during the healing time?
Yeah.
That's a great question. It's easy and difficult to answer at the same time, because like, how bad is their symptom? Like we always say, like what's like the history behind it, but I would say cut it back like 50% maybe and go from there. So if you cut it back a little bit more, then you know, okay, if there's no pain while they're training, then they can start gradually bringing it back. There's no detriment, right? So if I say run 40K and there's no pain, then okay, maybe next week bump it up to 50. Okay, there's a little bit of pain, let's stay in that threshold and then continue on. And if you like scale it back from 80 to 70, for instance, then like if there's lots of pain doing that, then you may have extended that healing timeline. So it's good to like stay conservative, I'd say, and then progress from there. That's what I use.
And the person will know too, like if a person's doing 80K a week, that's like quite a bit. So depending on them, they might know that they can run for 20 minutes before the pain starts.
Yeah.
And there's your answer, like, okay, you can run for 20 minutes. And then that's where you're at for now. Like keep it to every other day, do some cross training in between.
And the whole pain journal, running journals are huge. Very important. Again, a lot of people, like even in school when I was learning about pain journals and like track your symptoms journal, I'm like, this is lame. Like no one does that. And then now in the last couple of years of treating, like huge. People write down what's wrong with them and you read it and like, okay, now I know exactly what's wrong. Like I know your day to day. So that's a good way to answer that question, I think. Exercise wise, you want to get into shin splint stuff, Rob?
Yeah, so let's do those kind of posterior shin splints. So with running, like
sorry, I'll move it as you move.
Keep going down.
I'll move it as you move.
So with running, and this might be getting like too deep into it, but the big stresses on a muscle are going to be like your peak load, which is the kind of the like during your gait, the portion of the gait where there's the most force through the muscle. There's the kind of the energy storage component, which is your it's kind of like your plyometric portion. Like the muscle is going to be contracting often eccentrically and then concentrically, and then you have your like kind of your volume component, so like your cumulative load. So that can be like the number of X thousands of steps that you're taking per run, and you're going to sort of like rehab things in that order. So you're going to use strength to rehab kind of that peak force. You're going to use something like a plyometric to rehab that energy storage component, and then your gradual return to activity is going to kind of build back in that like cumulative loading. That's the way that I think about it, anyways. Yeah, it's kind of is those three. But yeah, with that being said, like very early on, you might have to really like de-stress the tissue until they get their pain controlled at baseline, and then you're going to kind of build into it from there. Anyways.
Good.
Yeah.
And specific exercises, Rob?
Yeah. So like for something like
I'll be the camera guy here. One second.
Yeah. So if we're talking about a muscle that's kind of like that's inverting and plantar flexing, even something like a calf raise can be good for loading that up. And you can see me here a little bit. Here, I'll show some calf.
Holy, that's a nice calf.
So
it's a nice piece of meat.
And again, like thinking progressively, you might even be starting with kind of a bilateral calf raise and then progressing up to like unilateral from there. Like you want to be increasing the load for them too. So if I get to a point where I can do like 20 or 30 repetitions with a single leg, and it's not really reproducing any symptoms, I can do it every day and it's no problem. Then you're going to want to load it up further. You could have them wear like a backpack with some textbooks in it, or holding some dumbbells, or like a barbell, depending on like where you're training, if it's practical. But you're going to want to load it. Eventually, like you do want to get heavy with it. So you want to get to a point where they can do about like 7 or 8 repetitions until they're failing. It's okay to go that heavy with a person as they're kind of building their rehab with it. Yeah. Another way that you can load it would be kind of
let's just follow Rob running around here.
Yeah, speaking of running around,
look at that.
It would be something like, and you'd want to have this like around a table leg or something like that, but where you're going to be kind of like resisting inversion here. You can see me on both screens with that one. And again, you want to get the resistance eventually like quite heavy. Like you don't want to be going 50 or 60 reps. You want to be going kind of a heavy, slow load on that. You'll notice this movement especially, it doesn't look anything like running. Like the calf raise, maybe you could see a little bit of a kind of a parallel with push off. But with the rehab exercises for running, they're not always going to look like running. Basically, we're just trying to load tissue that hasn't responded to being overloaded. Yeah. So you don't invert during running, but you can use inversion as running rehab to kind of overload the muscles that are inverters. So that's kind of an example of what kind of that strength loading might look like. If I go to the wall here for a second,
I can rotate that to the wall.
Like this.
There.
Something you might use again if your effective muscle is a plantar flexor. So we were using like our calf raise for strengthening. You could do something like a single leg kind of like a bounce, this kind of a thing, where you're going like higher speed with it. That can sort of be like your plyometric component, where you're getting that eccentric control on descent and then concentric push off as you come back up again. Yeah. So those would be a couple examples for that one. And you could even do kind of like with that band again, with that inversion, you could load it up heavy there too. Those are things usually that I would progress to like after strength has gotten to a pretty good level and has started to plateau a little bit. Then I would get into the more plyometric stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Speaking of plyometrics now, oh my gosh, let's see if I can do it today. I'll do it quickly because we only got like 10 minutes-ish left, but I want Rob to talk about the shoes he's got. So plyometrics, for instance, if we're looking at either shin splints or IT band, you can, and this will still strengthen abductors of the hip. Like last week we talked about doing squats. Let's say this is a bar, but like putting like a band around your knees and then doing squats while keeping the knees straight. That will help with hip abduction. So strengthening glute med and things like that. Another thing you can do for plyometrics, easy because you don't need really any equipment. Reps wise, Stephen, I'd say start off 3 by 10. That's going to be pretty good. I'd say maybe 3 by 7 to start. 2 by 20 is going to be might be a bit much. So yeah. Oh wait, I'm clicking around. Okay, so doing plyometric, I like doing squat jumps. So I like using a dowel, for instance, just to keep my form good, correct, keeping my back straight. So with the squat jump, all you do is you kind of go into a deep squat and then jump up and then deep squat up, just like that. I lost my balance. So doing maybe 5 or 6 at a time, right? So jump up, just like that. So that's your plyometric there. A lot of strength, a lot of impact. It's happening through all of those joints. So I think that's a good one to do. So maybe doing like 6 sets of 6 or 5 sets of 5. You do too many to start, then you could cause some patellar issues. Doing like box jumps too. So if I grab some stuff here, and that's easy to do, right? Like you can do that right before you run. Right, so you have bench here. There should be. Bench is probably not what you want to use. You want to use a box, but our box is being used for our laptop right now, right? So doing box jumps, so just jumping up and down. So try to land on the actual box, right? So just like that. The first one, disregard. So if you have a bigger surface, you're not going to fall forward like I did, right? So jumping on a box, getting your balance, and then stepping off. Jumping on a box, getting your balance, stepping off. So you want to do that, even like box jumps. I'll tell people to do that. You could use the same thing, 5 sets of 5, and see how it goes. Start low, and then work your way up. So that's a few things to do. I want to give Rob some time to talk about his shoes.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll be really quick with the shoes. But again, post questions at the same time if you have them, because we're running out of time. So we talked about how like injury rates over time, it's hard to see changes there. So some people kind of hypothesize that since shoes have changed so much over the last like 40 years or 50 years now, I guess, why haven't injury rates changed? got some people to thinking, okay, maybe footwear doesn't make a difference when it comes to injuries. But other studies that have randomized people to different footwear have found differences between groups in injury rates. So footwear does seem to make a difference. There's other reasons that we talked about, like definitions of what a running injury is, that can kind of like cloud the trend line over time. And other stuff like that we can talk about. But I want to talk about a couple of mine. These are the shoes that I'm wearing right now. So people always ask, like, what is the best kind of shoe to wear? I like to refer to like a research group in Calgary that put papers out a few years ago, and they talk about just kind of the comfort paradigm. So basically, they say that the comfiest shoe is the one that's going to make you least susceptible to injury.
Makes sense.
So I know it's like so simple, right? Sense. Which is like what I love. I love stuff that's like simple and intuitive. Like it's not unsimple and non-intuitive. I don't know what else. Anyways, it just makes sense. So basically they had people try on a few different pairs of shoes. They picked the one that was most comfortable for them. Then they were randomized. They may have been given the shoe they picked, or they could have been given a different shoe. And it was the people who were given the shoe that they found most comfortable who had the lowest rates of injury. So basically, if you're in the shoe store, you try on 6 shoes, the one that's the comfiest is the one that's going to give you the least injuries. So that really makes sense. Simple, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah. We kind of talked about, sorry, these smell awful.
I don't smell them.
Okay. So this is my regular running shoe is a Morel shoe, and it's what's called a 0 drop shoe. So the heel is the same height as the toe. So there's no build up in the heel. Usually I find these very comfortable. But since the pandemic, I've been running more because I've had more spare time, and I developed a little bit of Achilles pain. So going back to kind of that like load versus activity bar there. So I was loading my Achilles more than my tissue could keep up with, and it was giving me pain. So solution, reduce my volume a little bit, but then also talking about how like peak loads, volume, and then kind of that energy storage and release are the things that are going to be stressing that tendon. The Achilles tendon in running is the most stressed when your ankle is kind of in that maximal dorsiflexion position. So with the 0 drop shoe, you get more dorsiflexion at the end of your stance phase before you toe off. So with this is my other running shoe. This is from a few years ago. I brought it back into circulation. It has a bit more of a built up heel. So it keeps my Achilles out of that stress position a bit more. And I'm able to run in these ones right now pain-free. Yeah. So that's an example of an intervention you can use like even before building exercise backing. If you know the injury and kind of like biomechanically, you can make alterations there that can keep you away from missing training. So, there are studies that alternating different types of footwear can be helpful for injury prevention as well. So circulating a couple of different shoes.
Okay, we got one question. So sorry guys, 30 seconds left. Instagram's limited for an hour. Zoom, we can continue a little bit to answer Brooke's question about foot strike. But feel free to give us recommendations. So next week, the weeks after, we want topics to talk about that's going to be relevant to everyone who's watching. So give us more injuries. Next week, we got Monday tendinopathy, and Thursday we're going to have pelvic floor. So there are 7 seconds, 5 seconds left. See you guys later. Thanks. Sorry, direct message us if you have any questions. Peace out. Okay, so share to story. Okay, so now let's get to Brooke's questions. No, not high heels. Lol.
No high heels.
What is the best foot strike to recommend for people with shin splints? You noted the toe strike leads to more tib post issues, and then heel strike is more knee and hip issues. So is midfoot more optimal? Foot strike's an interesting topic. Mm-hmm. It's argued quite a bit. The studies of like switching to forefoot or midfoot, that's what like barefoot running does. But that causes certain issues. I think if you just adjust things too quickly, it's going to cause issues. But
for sure,
I don't have too much to say about that, to be honest. Like, I think you could land however you like. If we're trying to change it, I think there could be issues, but trying to get you comfortable running the way you're running. So if your tissues are not responding very well, like you're having a lot of pain, shin splints, then like let's treat what's going on. And might not likely be the impact, like the way you're running. It might just be the tissues, not the mechanics of the running itself, like the foot contact. But Rob can comment more on that.
Yeah, like
he's the runner.
I think like Sunny said, studies that have transitioned people from like a rear foot strike to a forefoot strike, they haven't they haven't been like a miracle cure. Injury rates are about the same. And like we mentioned, like those injuries are going to be different. And like you mentioned, even in your question, like for the most part, injuries are going to kind of shift more towards the ankle, which absorbs more of that kind of that ground reaction force with a forefoot strike versus a heel strike. Like the midfoot strike, it's kind of like the, well, I don't know. It's kind of the compromise between the two.
Yeah.
Some people have said that the midfoot strike doesn't even exist. There's like one, I think he must be Russian because his name's Romanov, but he wrote a book about how it's like the unicorn. He says it's like, it sounds great, but like, does anyone really do it? I don't know. Anyways, but that's not the question. So if someone has like an anterior shin splint, like that tibialis anterior muscle, so you might say that a heel striker is more likely to have that because they're going to be sort of pulling the toe up on impact, right? Mm-hmm. Versus like a forefoot runner, you'll have like less of that active dorsiflexion through swing and at contact. But I think like the even bigger factor there, and we didn't talk about this today, but maybe if we do running again next week, is overstride. So if you think about kind of like the length of your stride, a lot of people like kind of correlated that with injury risks. So people who take like bigger strides are more likely to have injuries than people who take like more shorter strides. And even more importantly there than the length of the stride is sort of where the stride is relative to your center of mass. Is this Physio Brooke who asked?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I don't mind saying center of mass then.
No, you can jargon it up.
I'll use my biomechanics 20 or whatever it was. So basically, people who land with their foot ahead of their body, they're going to have more like vertical oscillation to their run. They can have up to 40% more, again, like kind of ground reaction force coming up through that tissues have to deal with. And then they're also going to have more like braking force. So when your foot's in front of you when you land, if you kind of like think of the tibia as being your kind of like your vector and that ground reaction force being equal and opposite, it's going to push you up, which you need to maintain your center of mass as you move along. And it's going to push you backwards a little bit, which is going to be like kind of a braking force again. So like rather than adjusting like foot strike, heel versus toe, I would try getting the person to think about landing with their foot underneath their body. So like an easy cue for that one can be like if you're running and if you can see your toes, try to run so that you can't see your toes. Or think about your foot landing directly under your body. And again, if you think like vectors, if your shin is perfectly like vertical when you're landing and it's right under your center of mass, you're only going to have like a vertical ground reaction force, which again is going to keep you up, which you need, but it's not going to give you that braking force. And so because of that, there's going to be less forces to absorb. And when you're not swinging through as much to get the foot more ahead of your body, there's going to be less active dorsiflexion through swing and less eccentric kind of tib-ant work at heel strike to kind of slow your foot from kind of making that like slapping noise if you are overstriding. So theoretically, you could switch towards forefoot, but like I think most people who treat runners now aren't trying to change foot strike patterns as much as they were before.
I think so, Like it's just like the shoe just be comfortable. So like, I guess for me, you're gonna change foot strike slightly anyway. So if like you're too plantar flexed or those muscles are too tight, and you stretch them out and strengthen the antagonist group, then you're gonna change that foot strike anyways. Like it's gonna change slightly. It's not gonna be like a complete like from forefoot to rear foot, but you might get more midfoot or like more like posterior to the forefoot behind the forefoot, and you're going to indirectly change that pattern. Not indirect. Well, you're correcting the muscle imbalance. I think it's more important to correct that muscle imbalance than it is here's how everyone should run. Exactly. Then you cause issues like that. That barefoot running shoe, like the Vibram 5 Fingers or whatever, I was into that quite a bit initially, straight up because it was cool. Like it looked cool to me. So in Chicago in 2008, I bought my first pair. Not to like change the way I run. I just like bare feet. I'm like having, nothing on in terms of the feet. And I used them and it caused a lot of issues. Like I realized you had to gradually work into it. And then they had all these studies with that brand that it shifted to midfoot and forefoot, which, yeah, like running on your heel barefoot is very uncomfortable. So you're just gonna,
right, yeah.
you're just gonna go forefoot anyways. And we actually ran a study. When I was at Dalhousie University, we had access to this huge, expensive force plate. And I was like, let's do this study. And we did a 2-week study, not very long, where one of 2 people in our group actually ran with those every day. And it did actually show from heel to midfoot. So like rear foot to midfoot, there was that change. Mm-hmm. And they all felt worse. Like they didn't like it at all, because they made a huge change in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then they had all these lawsuits and stuff where people are overtraining. But I know with that shoe, their brand, it said to ease into it. It said like 30 minutes a day for a month, not like throw them on and run for an hour and a half. So
yeah,
I think what Rob mentioned is perfect. Is it's more so like the stride can make a bigger difference, and that's proven, versus like the forefoot, midfoot, rear foot. From what I've researched, it's skewed. Like it's one study will say, okay, it's worse with this. One study will say, and then there's just all these systematic reviews that show like it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Like there's no agreement. So I think it's more so maybe don't focus too much on the foot strike, focus on the stride length, like Rob said, and then the muscle imbalances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just like another anecdote, I tried switching to forefoot running a couple of years ago. I read a book called Born to Run. It's like one of the more popular running books. Decided to switch to forefoot. Spent like the whole summer trying to ease into it. I had tight calves for like 6 months straight.
Yeah, like that's
now I've like eased off a little bit. But it takes forever. Even, and I was a person who ran almost every day even before that. So, the short answer is maybe forefoot might theoretically spare the tibialis anterior a little bit, but you're probably going to get better results with shortening stride, which can also be increasing cadence. Again, won't get into that right now, but those things can make a bigger impact, and then just gradual loading again. Yeah. So if I'm a brand new runner, even if I'm running perfectly, if I kind of exceed the tissue capacity, I'm going to get injured anyways. It doesn't matter if my technique is Olympic level or anything.
Yeah.
Like my tissues just aren't ready for it. So for people who have developed shin splints, I would first look at kind of that loading volume again. And it's more likely to be that than anything.
No, that's good. I think that's a super good answer to that question.
Yeah.
And everyone,
answer.
Go on our website, check out the latest blog by the individual that asked the question, Brooke. She wrote a blog, a very good blog about telehealth. Very easy to, very easy to follow, and it kind of gives you a good breakdown of what tele-rehab is. And Brooke's comment here, great explanation. Yeah. Happy Easter. See you next week. Sounds like a talk on stride length and cadence would be sweet.
Yeah, hold on.
We could do that.
Before you go, look, we didn't get to this one today, but I made a ground reaction forces drawing too. So maybe next week we'll talk about that.
We could do that next Friday.
I even have horizontal and vertical force vectors.
That gives us like 4 topics next week. We just need one more. So give us feedback for everyone else that's on here. If you have any other topics you want us to cover. Yes, drawings are our next level.
I appreciate that.
I'll try to do something to impress people next week.
I'll learn how to use a computer one day.
But
not today.
Not today. Join us next week, guys. Thanks for coming. Keep spreading the word. Stay in school. Do your homework. Listen to your parents.
But don't go to school.
Yeah. If you don't like physically go to school.
They're mostly closed.
And then with your parents, if they're at risk, then don't physically get close to them either. So pretty much just it's a study at home. All right, guys. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.